Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast, Let's Play It by Ear, featuring me, your host, Joanna, and my co host, Carrie. Say hello, Carrie.
Hi, everybody.
So, today we are talking about more myths. So, this is part two to our myths thing. Busted again. All right. So, first off, we're both teachers. We're both music teachers. So I would say that a lot of the myths that we deal with or that are expected of us um, surround teaching
Mm-hmm.
lessons, music lessons, stuff like that. So let's start with you, Carrie. What, I guess, frequent myths do you deal with as a music teacher and in music lessons?
Um, there is one that comes to the top of my mind. I think maybe not so much that I have to deal with, but excuse me, one that I've heard
Mm-hmm.
kind of circulating around. I don't remember where or who says these things. Um, but it goes something like those who can't play or perform, they teach.
Yeah, yeah. It I definitely felt this a lot in school. And
Mm.
I think cuz I felt like an underdog in school. I had a
Me
lot of
too.
right? Like I had a lot of problems with how I performed, how I played, not the strongest solo player. So it kind of like I kind of felt like it was weird because I love teaching. And I think that
Mm.
teaching involves incredible amount of skill to
Mm-hmm.
relay information. Um, but I just didn't feel it was really respected when we were in school. It was seen as like easy money. That's what how it was
Mm.
seen as. Um, I don't know. What did you think? Like, or what did you
Ye-
experience?
Yeah, it felt like I mean, before graduating school, it just felt like something a lot of our peers would do just to, like you said, easy, quote unquote, easy money, because it's not. Teaching is never easy, really. Um, and also something that's just expected of you, I think, as you progress. But I have to say I wholeheartedly disagree with that myth because if anything, I feel like teachers know their material better, dare I say?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
And like you said, it is a definite skill to know how to relay that information to um, different age groups. Like for yourself, you teach majority adults.
Yep.
I teach the earlier years, the younger years, to all the way to upper, like late teens.
Mm-hmm. I take it from
So
late teens and on.
yeah, you continue.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of knowing like what information you need to relay to that age group at that point, but also using the words and the terminology that they understand. And if
Mm-hmm.
they don't understand, how can you reword that? How can you rephrase that or demonstrate it so they understand? And also catering to different learning styles as well too.
Yep. 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 Yep.
So yeah, I don't agree with the myth.
I don't agree with it either because at least I feel that um, I definitely felt like it was seen as easy money in
Hmm.
um, in music school because you get paid a lot more per hour. Um, but what you don't see behind the scenes is what happens on your off hours. Um,
Yeah.
because it's not a true 9 to 5. Um, if you teach locally, you're always going to be teaching in the afternoon and the evenings and on the weekends. So you're essentially teaching exactly not in the 9 to 5 time.
Hmm.
Um, right now, I'm very lucky to work basically between 10 to 6, um, which is very unusual, but it's because I get to teach people in different time zones. Um,
Hmm.
And so for them, it's in their evening. For me, it's in during the workday. So like that has only happened though because we have the technology to do so. I mean, we're using technology right now to even record this podcast, you know? So, like, I'm used to doing long distance stuff, you know? And, like, but, you know, when you're a typical musician, I would classify myself as pretty atypical. But if you're a typical musician, you're actually teaching pretty much between, like, when school gets out, so, like, 3 or 4 p.m., to, like, 9, something like that. I mean, usually kids will, the latest a kid will stay for a lesson is like 9, but that's like a high school student, you know. You know, like little kids go to bed at like 7 or 8 p.m., you know, like they kind of have to have their lesson at like 4, you know. So you're really only teaching like 3-4 hours in the afternoon, and that's it. And people are like, oh man, you get paid so much per hour. It's like, well, you only get paid like for like 3-4 hours, you know. So like it kind of evens out in terms of the money. So like it seems to be easy money, but the price is that you are teaching when other people are off. So you're working when other people are off. It does make your social life fairly non-existent as a result. So, you know, you kind of, if you are hanging out with other people, you tend to hang out with other musicians, artists who also are not working during the day, you know? So, or what a lot of musicians do is they fill in those times with like performances and stuff like that. And then you teach in, you know, every now and then sporadically you teach in the afternoons and evenings, but like it's just so sporadic that like people think it's easy money. But I would say, like, weirdly enough, I guess that's also a myth too, that teaching is easy money.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not, but like there's a, like, just the fact that you have to think about a lot more than just music when you're teaching, because you're thinking about the student, as you're saying, you're thinking about what is appropriate for them to learn. You know, how old are they, where are they in their development, you know, and also like what do they want to learn. Like for me, I actually usually have to push myself to not explain things in such an elementary fashion, because all of my students want to know the full context for something. Right. So they want that whole lesson where when I'm talking about a certain, you know, piece of music, I talk about that time period, talk about the historical context, talk about where the flute was in the development at the time, blah, blah, blah. Like they want all of that, you know? I would say most kids probably don't care. At least I didn't care when I was a kid. So like that has really pushed me, because like I almost kind of feel like if you're to ask any random performing musician a random question like that, just like suddenly give me the historical context of this piece and the development of the flute at that time, it's basically a master's defense. That's what I did for my master's defense. It was half an hour of me taking this piece, analyzing it to high heaven, and then talking about it and talking about the historical context of it, the music theory concepts behind it, and also the, you know, the development of the flute at that stage, who was it written for, for half an hour. And then the second half an hour was, they gave me a piece of music. I had 48 hours to study it. And I had to do the same thing: historical context, the music theory concepts that are being demonstrated in it, and like, you know, how is it significant to me as flutist, right? That is every lesson for me.
That's intense.
Like, I don't think that is, like, that is not, it's not easy.
It's not. To be fair, for performers, they would know this as well, I think.
Yeah.
At the back of their minds.
Yeah.
or they might do a bit of light research just to remind themselves. But for teachers, it's very much at the forefront. It's what you have to articulate on a daily basis if you teach every day to the students.
It's like constant presentation. You're
Yeah.
actually constantly presenting this information.
Hmm.
And it's it definitely you it's not just because you can't play that's why you're teaching. It's a choice to teach.
Yeah, it's a passion as well too.
Yeah, it's a choice, it's a passion, it's something that you're convicted to do
Hmm.
because it fulfills you.
Yeah. And
It's
because you want to ensure music lives on as
on.
well too. So you have to encourage the next generation. And for on my end, like for your younger kids, you very much have to encourage them and to kind of explain to them why we have to do things a certain way, why you want to make it sound like this, because I tell them you're trying to tell a story. If you and I try to draw parallels between
Mhm.
verbally telling a story.
Mhm.
It's like using that as a way to demonstrate breath marks,
Yeah.
or where you breathe, or phrasing ends, where phrasing starts,
Yep.
things like that. It's a lot of brain work. And
Yes.
if you have a full studio like yourself, it's a lot of time that you have to spend to research that, to cross reference, and also just to keep things in check, to know this goes for this student, this goes for that student,
Mhm.
and not to get things mixed up.
And you do it often enough that sometimes you do kind of have a prepared shtick. Like, I have almost
Yeah.
sort of like a frequently asked questions like mental list. One of them is the development of the flute, like a Joe's truncated history of the development of the flute over like
Hmm.
from the Baroque era till now, and like how it affected the music that was written for the flute. Like I have sort of like a truncated Joe's history of it that I give to
Hmm.
students who ask because I've been asked it so many times. But it is basically like a prepared presentation that I just kind of
Hmm.
it just lives in my head and I can bust it out anytime. Like, I never thought that I would have that skill, but that whatever the job requires, you kind of end up doing. Like my
Yeah.
students find it
Yeah.
disgusting when I like don't even have the book out that I'm telling them to turn to, and I'm like, okay, so like get your book out, turn to page 6. We're gonna talk about harmonics, and they're always kind of like, like, or
Where's your book?
yeah, and like my book is like on like back there, but like I have it memorized because I've just used it so many times to teach that I'm just like,
Mm.
okay, page 6 is this, page 7 is that, like, and now we're gonna skip to page 90, blah 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 for some technique, etc., etc. Like you don't hold that information in your head unnecessarily. You know what I mean? Like it's a
Yeah.
choice. It's a choice to do this. It's not just because you can't perform, you
Hmm.
know. So, and I still want to perform too. It's not that I like can't perform,
You very much can perform.
right? Like I think you can do both in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah.
We should perform together.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean,
How about you?
let's see. What did yeah. So mine is weirdly on the same topic. And it's actually the second thing that we wrote here, which is that teachers know everything. Um
Mm.
so it's weird because we do have a lot of information that we just hold in our heads because we just teach it so often, you know. However, that doesn't mean that we know everything. And I actually was just talking about this on stream this week that I feel that in my younger years I had insanely unrealistic expectations of my teachers. Like
Okay, how so?
I kind of expected them to be perfect and to just cater to exactly what I need without me telling them.
Oh, ooh.
Like,
Mind readers.
yeah, like my brain was like, didn't understand that other people don't work the same way as I do.
Mm.
And I applied that to the teachers, except like it was weird because on the one hand, I assumed that they work the same way as I do
Mm-hmm.
and have the same thoughts and feelings and same opinions about stuff. And but I also expected them to know everything. So like I look back at that now and I'm like, how is that any different from some of my students who will like come to lessons and expect me to be a flute wizard? And, they will tell me, hey, Joanna, I can't play this part. And I'm like, okay, well, what's going on? And they're like, well, I just can't play it. And I'm like, we kind of need like a conversation here so I can
Yeah.
understand why you believe that you can't play it, or you kind of have to play it for me so I can
Mm-hmm.
hear the current state of it. And it was interesting because in the beginning I'd be like, okay, play it for me. But then I got pushback from that because they were like, no, I can't play it. And I'm like, well, I kind of need to hear you. They're like, I can't play it. Like, tell me how to play it. And I'm just kind of like,
Okay.
so that's why, like, over time, I started to reword how I said that. So nowadays I
Mm-hmm.
say, all right, we have two ways that we can deal with this. Straight up. Like, I just straight up tell them. One way is we have a conversation. You need to articulate to me to the best of your ability. I'm not telling you to be perfect in how you articulate how you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking this through, but you need to tell me very honestly what you want to happen, what is happening well, but what is not computing, right? Like, what are you
Mm-hmm.
attempting to do? What are you attempting to do with your lips? What are you attempting to do with your air? What are you attempting to do with blah, 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 right? Like, what are you striving to actually do? And because what I realized was that before, they wouldn't tell me because they thought that they would describe it wrong.
Oh.
So they would rather not
Huh.
tell me because they were
Okay.
scared of getting it wrong. Right. But so now I have to explain to them that I want to hear how you are currently figuring it out because then I can give you more context
Yeah.
as to what you are trying to achieve. Maybe I can find some missing information and, like fill in that gap of knowledge, right? So wording it that way, immediately, I noticed ever since I started saying it that way, every lesson has been a wonderful discussion now. But I had to be the one to say it's okay to describe it to me wrong. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're not gonna get in trouble or anything, but at the same time, I'm not a mind reader,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I also never had this conversation with my teachers, so it's just that I now had a taste of my teacher's medicine.
Yeah.
And so
I
now
gotcha.
I understand the myth that I was perpetuating as a student.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got it back on, like, karma. So I was like, okay, I mean, if it's karma, then like I'm going to make it right. I'm going to make it right by just throwing the doors of communication open and saying, you either tell me to the best of your ability or you show me to the best of your ability.
Mm-hmm.
And it is okay to not play it wrong. In fact, I would rather you play it wrong so that I can see what's happening. So
Mm-hmm.
I straight up tell them now, play it for me wrong. I want to hear it wrong,
Yeah.
And then that's when they're like, oh, okay. like, I'm not gonna be judged. I'm like, you're not paying me to judge you. You're paying me to help you, okay? Like, you can't go to a doctor and be like, what's wrong with me? You know? And then, like, not tell them any of your symptoms.
Actually, that's a good way to compare. Because doctors won't read minds unless it's like it's a sign.
Yeah, like if they can
Right, then they
see.
can see. But if
Yeah.
it's a symptom, you gotta tell them.
Yeah, because sometimes symptoms come and go.
Mm-hmm.
The same way when you play an instrument, because some days you play it good and some days you play it bad. Some days you play it bad, and that's kind of normal, right? But like it comes and goes, right? So that's why you kind of have to talk about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was both a myth that I perpetuated when I was a student, and then it bit me in the butt when I became a teacher.
That's a good one. I think I'm trying to start my students young, and because I go through the same thing too, but they are young enough that I'm able to mold them in a way. So now they're not exactly too afraid to play it for me.
That's
I
good.
usually say I ask at the beginning of lesson, oh so or like starting a new piece or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
How was your practice for this piece or that piece or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
So like okay, no problem. Let's play it through. And then I lay out for them. Let's play it through, and then we'll see where you're getting stuck at, and then we'll work through things. So step by step.
Yeah.
And they understand that it's a process,
Mm-hmm. That's
even though
so
they're
good.
young. So.
That is so good because, like, I think I get a lot of traumatized students from previous lessons.
Ooh.
I get a lot of traumatized students, like legit traumatized. Like they get very, very, very anxious when playing for me. So I do have to kind of like coach them through very explicitly, like, please play it for me wrong. I'm here to help you. You know, like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to put you down that because you didn't do it correctly. In fact, if I'm just sitting here praising you and just telling you you're really great, you don't need to pay me to do that, okay? Like, you know, you're paying me for a service, and I'm here to deliver that service. Unfortunately, I cannot deliver that service if I don't have any fodder to use. Like, I need either you telling me something or showing me something. Like,
Yeah.
like I need one of the two, preferably both.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, it be what it be, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's a challenge with adult students. I never really thought about that because I don't really deal with that age group.
yeah,
But yeah, for me, I get them young. Sometimes, most of the time, I get them when they're just starting.
that's so good. You
So
are that
that's
first
a
positive
difference.
experience. Yeah.
I try to be. I try my best to be because I think I've been lucky in my own earlier years. I have had teachers who are very supportive.
That's
So
so
I've learned
good.
through that.
I've had quite a few very supportive teachers too, and I would say I emulate their teaching in my teaching.
Yeah.
Um, I have also had not so great experiences, but I think I now look back with a lot of empathy. You know, I understand where things went wrong, and I understand that I had a part in it too. You know, like, I can't just go around blaming them for our lessons going wrong. That's not fair, you know? And you know, it takes two to dance, right? So
Yeah.
like, I look back and I'm like, wow, I was not an easy student. Like I get it, you know. And I'm sorry, you know, but it totally did come around and bite me in the butt as a teacher. Like, you know, karma came back, you know. But like, so
Yeah.
I just decided, you know what, we're going to just, you know, face it and accept it and make things right, you know.
Pay it forward.
So I guess now we should move on to the next little section just to kind of wrap things up a little bit, because we kind of touched on this too, which is like, are there myths that we feel that we subconsciously help perpetuate? I think this is a hard question to answer though, because it is subconscious.
Yeah.
And what can we do to change it? So What's yours?
That's an even harder question.
Yeah, it is. So what's your myth?
Mine, reading from our notes here.
Mm-hmm.
I still very much would answer to bassoon. Yes.
You are the bassoon, and the bassoon is
I
you.
am the bassoon, and if I look in the mirror, I definitely am not. So yeah.
It would be alarming if you saw a bassoon instead of you. You know, just saying.
Well, if I'm hallucinating, maybe. Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, I very much feel like it's intermingled with my identity. And that's something I know shouldn't really be.
like, what do you understand to be the dangers of doing that?
You lose yourself as a person and you don't know who you are without music. And that your question of saying what can we do to not perpetuate that, I really don't have an answer right now.
Yeah.
I'd like to work towards one if anyone has any advice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I draw a complete blank.
I wrestled with that exact thing for a long time. I think I've mentioned it on this podcast before, but for anyone who missed those episodes, this question was posed to me by a Catholic nun. And she was like, "Who are you without the flute?" So I've been wrestling with that question since I was 16. So I've been wrestling with it since before music school. So it has always been a question that has been hanging in the back of my mind, even while I felt that in music school we were sort of molded into becoming one with our instruments, you know?
Yeah.
So I also don't have a straight answer. But
I was gonna say, I was like, what have you come up with?
like I don't have a straight answer because like I would say that the flute is part of me. Definitely. It definitely is a part of me. I cannot deny that, right? But I think the danger for me is that if I wrap my identity up with the flute, I wrap my identity up with the flute world. So it's like, where is my reputation in the flute world? How do people see me in the flute world? Where do I stand? How much about the flute do I know? Like, essentially my worth would be measured by how fluty I am. And if there's ever a time that I do not live up to that, that expectation, then I fail as me, right? So my way of counteracting that was to, instead of feeling like I would feel attacked when someone told me about something about the flute that I didn't know about. Like I would feel personally attacked for a while. But then what I realized was, you know, you can't really like unfeel feelings. Like that's not a thing, okay? You feel it. But what matters is how you react to it after, right? So I consciously made myself go, literally say in my head, "Oh, I don't know that. Cool, I know it now." Like, I have ascended, you know? Like, I've been enlightened. I've leveled up in my knowledge, you know? Like, I made it a good thing to find out I didn't know something and now have learned it. And it makes it so that it's not about the flute, it's about me. And like weirdly, I find that helps me separate.
Do you do the same thing with other pieces of information that you may receive?
I do that
Not
naturally.
related to music?
I do that naturally
Oh, okay.
to other pieces of information. I'm always like, "Oh, wow, I didn't know that. That's cool." You know, like that's
Yeah.
usually my gut reaction to anything that's not music. But if it is music,
Hmm.
like even now from time to time, I'll be like, oh my God, I didn't know that. Oh, you know, but then I'll be like, no, 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 no. This is a good thing. This is, you know, like I
Hmm.
had to like consciously, I guess this is like cognitive behavioral, like, you know,
Training,
training.
conditioning.
Yeah, it is like I'm like I am. I'm conditioning myself to want to learn about something I haven't learned about the flute. That
Hmm.
it's a good thing. Like now
Hmm.
I know this new thing about the flute. And it's not a personal attack. It's okay. Like it's also okay that I felt that it was a personal attack at first. Like I'm
Yeah.
not denying that either, right? Like I'm recognizing that this is something that I still need to work on as me.
Hmm.
And like the other nice thing is not only have I learned something about the flute, I've also overcome this, you know, feeling attacked, and I've turned it into a great experience for me.
Hmm.
So it's kind of a win-win,
Hmm.
you know? But that's how I've been doing it. And it's hard because you don't necessarily always pick up on when you feel personally attacked.
Yeah. But I think that's a very wise way of going about it, though, because ultimately you're kind of saying, you're acknowledging again that you're not perfect, you don't know everything,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and
So,
you're helping yourself grow as a whole person, not just as a musician. So you're kind of separating that side of you.
yeah, like weirdly enough, learning more about the thing that you know, really shouldn't use as your full identity, like learning more
Hmm.
about that and then counting that as like, oh, I learned something. It's really
Yeah.
weird, but that actually separates you from that thing.
Hmm. It's kind of like
Like,
a personal triumph, like you said. Oh, I've ascended. I now
yeah,
know
yeah,
something I didn't know.
exactly. It's a personal thing. It's not because the issue with that I find with identifying myself as just a flutist, like, is that if I ever learn anything about the flute that I have not learned before, it means I failed as a flutist, which is why I take it as a personal attack,
Hmm.
right? Whereas if you think of it as enlightening yourself and making yourself better, right? Like you can't say that as I've I've made, you know, like no one would ever say, "Oh, I've just made my identity as the flute better by like knowing that." No one actually says that. I mean, that's probably true, but no one ever says that. Like everyone's always like, oh my God, like, you know, I don't think that way. And, you know, and
Hmm.
I do this for a living, you know, like, um, yeah, like I've had to, and I'm still doing it now. Like, it still is feel personally attacked, then think about how I actually want to react and make the move to actually react that way. Like, ooh, let's learn more about this. Let's enlighten myself. Again, it's myself. It's not my flute self, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's very strange, but it works for me. Working, that is. Like, I'm still working on it.
It's definitely a work in progress. Well, that's why we don't have an answer to that question.
Yeah.
I don't know if we ever will, to be honest.
I don't think so. I've started to be okay with this being
Hmm.
a perpetual question.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's more important that we, one, are aware of it, two,
Yeah.
are acknowledging it,
Yeah.
and we're actively trying to, well, not so much separate ourselves from the musician self, but just knowing that if we ever were to stop doing music, we don't stop being ourselves. We still exist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just a certain component of us has changed.
Yeah. I like the wording of that too. Changed, like it's. I think that like at the end of the day, the bassoon is always going to be a part of you, you know, and the flute,
Yeah, I like that too.
right? The flute is always going to be a part of me.
Hmm.
Like you, like I understand the world, a lot of it through the worldview of a flutist,
Yeah.
like, and that's okay. Like, you can still have that separate from the instrument.
Hmm.
It's possible. You can, but like, fully wrapping up your self-worth in the instrument though, like that is a bit
That's
like,
dangerous.
yeah, like the instrument is not forever. There are
Hmm.
trends in the bassoon world, the flute world, how you play certain things, and there's things come and go, generations pass,
Yeah.
so like you can't put your self-worth in something that is that fleeting and changing.
Hmm. Very well put.
Well, um
Mm.
I mean, there's also, I guess, for mine, um it's an extension of the thing that I was talking about, where but teachers know everything, you know
Hmm.
specifically within that teachers know everything, the myth that I think I subconsciously help perpetuate is that my students think that I know what is right and what is wrong on the flute. So,
Oh,
right, like I get
it's all
probably,
black and white.
yeah, exactly. The most frequent question I get is, um, am I doing this right? That's the most frequent question I get. And like they'll show me a fingering, or they'll show me a posture, or they'll show me, what their lips are doing, blah, blah, blah. And I believe that I subconsciously perpetuated this because I made a whole bunch of how-to videos on YouTube.
Mm, okay.
So I became mistakenly, I never meant for this to happen, but I mistakenly became the person that a lot of people looked up to know what is right or wrong on the flute.
Mm,
But my actual answer to all of my students is always, it depends on you,
yeah.
but let me give you the wider context. So sometimes there's like a hot debate in the flute world, maybe about vibrato or something. So I'll give them both sides of the debate. And then I will say why I agree with actually both sides. So
Hmm.
a lot of times it has to do with projection and what venue you're playing in. Your vibrato can actually sound quite different depending on where you are, etc. So like I talk about that type of thing. So I guess the way that what I've been doing to change that perception is to constantly, like, it's just a constant over and over. I'm always like,
Mm.
here is the context. I give the context that I know, and I say, here's where I think you fall into that context. But what you'll notice is that maybe what is better for you to do is not what I do. Therefore, it is actually impossible for me to show you how
Mm.
to do some things. Like fingerings wise, I can show them the actual fingering and I can explain
Yeah.
what they all are. But there are actually some posture things I cannot show people. Because, for example, I have a very short thumb. And I cannot show my long thumbed Rachmaninoff hand students how they
Oh.
hold the flute, because they actually have to like rotate the flute slightly differently from me. They have to like put if they have like finger rests on the flute, they have to put it in a
Mm.
different location than me. They
Hmm.
can't just copy me, because I'm like, you see me do this, my hand's like twice as small as yours, like,
Yeah.
and my thumb is incredibly short. Yeah, you see how short my hand is? Like my thumb is, that is, like in
Your thumb?
comparison to my rest of my, yeah, because yours is a bit longer. But you see how
Mm.
short mine is compared?
It goes up to that line, kind of.
Yeah, like
There.
mine
Yes.
barely goes. Like it's basically at that line.
And then mine.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess
yours
so.
is quite a bit longer than mine. Like mine is quite short. So like, it poses a problem on the flute because essentially my thumb can't reach the flute in order
Right.
to be at like a good
Ooh.
relaxed posture. Right. That's
Mm-hmm,
why I
mm-hmm.
have to have like a little rest that sticks out and essentially acts as like an extension of the flute out. Right.
Oh.
But I have had students who like had looked at my videos and was like, ah, yes, I will get myself a thumb port, and put it on. And they're like, it's so uncomfortable. And then when we look at it a bit more, I'm like, of course it's uncomfortable for you. You don't need the extra length, like you don't,
Yeah.
you're, you're fine. Your hands are long enough. Your thumb is long enough. Like you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to do what I do. And they're always like, you like, it's like, no, like it is actually true that like my truth may not be your truth
Mm-hmm.
because like, and so I have noticed that some students love that answer, and I have also noticed that some students hate that answer.
Yeah, they can. It can be very frustrating, I think, from a student's perspective to not be able to get as concrete as an answer as you can from your teacher. But I think what you're doing is good. You're just saying what works for me may not necessarily work for you, but let's figure it out together and see, experiment
Yeah,
what works for your setup and who you are as a person
exactly.
physically.
Exactly. And like you want to know the why it works, right? So a
Yeah.
lot of times what I do is like I tell them this is what works for me, but this is why it works for me. And I show them things like my hand, my thumb, and I show them, et cetera, et cetera. And then like for some students, they might have double jointed thumbs. So they'll like bend all the way down, which means they lose even more length,
Oh,
right?
right.
So it's like, well, then, how far does it bend? Do you need a splint to hold it straight? Because you can get arthritis splints to just hold it straight. And
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, you can get arthritis splints. They're really cheap, and you can get arthritis splints to hold them straight so that you don't lose that length. And then it's like once you have that length, like, do you need extra length? So do you need a thumb port? Do you need a Woodify twig? Do you need et cetera, et cetera? Do you need a different? There's so many different like little rests that you can get. So it's like which one works for you, which one, why does it work? We have to figure out all that kind of stuff. Some people, I would say that all the students that I have now love it. I I can tell that some students probably left because I wouldn't give them a straight answer.
Well, to each his own.
Like, I get it. They probably would have a much better time finding a teacher who has a very similar build as them and can just tell them what works. Like, I could see that working too.
May not always work all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, you could potentially find a teacher who has a very similar like physical build as you. And maybe everything they do works for you. That's fine too. So, it's just that if you're working with me, I can almost guarantee that most of my students are not built like me. Like, actually, yeah, straight up, most of my students are not built like me. I think I've only had maybe 2 or 3 students who I can tell are like about the same height and have a lot of the same hand problems as me. Right? So for them, I can just basically tell them what I do and it works like a charm, But like, for everyone else though, like, nah, we have to work it through. So I guess that's how I'm trying to like go against that. But I kind of, again, it's kind of karma. Like I absolutely created and perpetuated this myth that I know what is right and what is wrong. But that's not the truth.
And that's okay because it gives us a reason to talk about it here on our podcast and explain why we can bust that myth.
Yep. All right.
Well, I think that gives us a lot of things to think about, and hopefully for our listeners and viewers as well too, gives you some things to mull over. probably a good place to leave.
I
Get
think
off there.
so. I think so. So I think it's your turn to do the
Yeah.
outro. You've heard me very recently do the outro to the other ones.
Yes.
Here we go.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this fourth episode where we bust myths again. This was part 2 of our myth busting program. If any of the myths resonated with you, or our thoughts and our views resonated with you, please feel free to leave us a comment, especially if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening. If you don't want to find out where you can listen to us as well, we have Anchor.fm. You can listen to us there. You can also find a link to that in YouTube videos on our website, letsplayitbyear.com. That's our website there, and there's also a contact form on there if you want to reach out to us that way.
Yeah.
If not, we also have an email, letsplayitbyear.podcast@gmail.com. You can send us an email there. Or if you enjoy social media, we have Instagram, we have Twitter, which is let_ear, and we also are on Facebook.
Yay!
So lots of different places you can reach out to us, contact us, and tell us what you think, how you feel.
Beautiful.
But thank you again, and we will see you in our next episode.
See you!
See you!